Chapter 4: The Mayan Temple. Stanley had traveled more than most people his age, and although he enjoyed visiting faraway places, it was not always easy. For instance, airmail was sometimes warm and uncomfortable. But the journey to see La Abuela was more difficult than any Stanley had ever taken. On this trip, he did not have the luxury of waiting patiently in an envelope or of being rolled up and placed on the back of a horse. On this trip, he walked. He walked and walked and walked, guided by Eduardo and three others, little Isabel with her wide eyes, and the tall boys named Esteban and Felipe. Stanley walked until he thought his legs would crumble. Finally, on the third day, Stanley was so tired he started seeing things. "I must be back in Egypt," he mumbled. "I see a pyramid." Eduardo grinned. "We are not in Egypt," he said. "That is a Mayan temple." He slapped Stanley excitedly on the shoulder. "We are getting close." Stanley stared up at the enormous pyramid rising out of the jungle. It was different from the ones in Egypt. It appeared that there was a giant staircase on each side, and all of the steps led to one place, a small, rectangular building on top. Isabel ran ahead and started up the steps. Esteban and Felipe followed her. Eduardo slowed his pace to walk alongside Stanley. "This was once a royal city," he explained. "There were roads, a palace, and aqueducts to carry water. For 2,000 years, the Mayan Empire stretched from here to Honduras." The Maya were scientists and mathematicians. They made a calendar that is more accurate than ours today. They figured out how long a year is on the planet Venus. Apart from ruins like these, only their descendants remain. At the base of the pyramid, Eduardo turned and leaned in close to Stanley. "And La Abuela is one of them." "Pardon-moi," a tall man with a thin mustache held out a camera to Stanley. He wore a white shirt that had 2 rows of buttons down the front. "Would you take my photo?" he said with a smooth French accent. "This is a very special day for moi." "Sure," said Stanley. This was the first tourist, other than himself, he'd seen the whole trip. "Say cheese," Stanley said. But instead of smiling, the man frowned like a clown. "No, no, no," he sang. "Cheese is not the ingredient we had in mind." 2 other men emerged from the jungle, one short and one fat, the other bald and muscular. Both wore the same uniform as the first man. Stanley noticed an insignia on the breast of their white double-button shirts. They looked like chefs. In fact, the bald one was holding what appeared to be a long kitchen knife. "Spies," realized Stanley. Eduardo turned and sprinted up the pyramid toward Isabel, Felipe, and Esteban. The man grabbed Stanley's arm before Stanley could follow.